Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. Prior to any of the following experiences, I was, and still am, a hard-working businessman. I didn't have time for out-of-the-box ideas or agendas. I run a consulting firm that keeps me constantly on my toes. I never had the mindset or the compulsion to think about what it meant to die. My first near-death experience occurred in 1995 when I was 45 years old. I had a massive heart attack and had to have a triple bypass. When I awoke from the anesthesia, I had a distinct memory of being transported to another dimension, or place, if you will. For several months, I thought it was the drugs, but after analyzing it in my head, I came to believe it was something else. I drifted or floated into a place of such peace that it is difficult to describe. There was the most beautiful blue sky I'd ever seen. I get a sense of calm whenever I look at a blue sky today. Tall grass was gently blowing in the wind over rolling hills, but there was no breeze or sound. It was extremely quiet. I wasn't walking, but rather floating slowly across the fields. This place exuded warmth, calm, and an inexplicable sense of fulfillment and oneness with the universe. I saw frames of my children flashing across the horizon as I slowly drifted over the hills, absorbing this feeling of great warmth. They weren't still photos, but rather images of them looking at me, concerned. They wanted me to return to be with them. They required my assistance, but said nothing. I could hear them, even though I couldn't see their lips move. I knew I had to make a decision right then and there. If I didn't, I wouldn't be returning. To continue, I would be surrounded by this peace and warmth indefinitely. It would have been nice to have continued. Going back would take me to a place of hurt and pain. It would be filled with pain and responsibility, emotional pain and life stress. I returned because my children needed more guidance in planning their futures. Their future depended on my presence. It was just not the right time. The children are simply not prepared to proceed on their own. I was back in an instant. I didn't see any bright lights, angels, or the presence of an entity. In 1997, I had my second near-death experience. I was in a serious car accident that resulted in numerous serious injuries. I had my pelvis broken in 3 places, a fractured tailbone, a rib that had punctured my lung, and a fractured skull with lacerations to my face. Part of my ear was severed when I was trapped in the car. For months, I had frequent flashbacks to that accident. When I became conscious enough to talk and stay awake without passing out several days later, I had a positive and complete memory of the near-death experience. I began discussing my experience with my son first, then with others as I became more comfortable doing so. I tried to figure out whether this was due to the drugs or signals from the mind as the body shut down. I saw a place of warmth, love, and friendship once more. It looked like a tunnel, but it wasn't round. It was more like a walkway tunnel, like the ones you see connecting buildings or stores, the type that goes over a street, not narrow, but wide. I walked along it, or so it felt, but I don't remember my feet moving. It was not bright on either right or left side of the walkway, but it was also not dark. When I got to the end of the tunnel, I saw people appear from their waists up. It was not at all frightening. Everyone was cheerful and smiling. They had a serious and apprehensive expression on their faces as they looked around to see who this new person in their midst was. I recognized some of the people. I saw 2 grandfathers as well as my father. It was very dark behind their bodies, and I could feel the presence of many others. Someone was greeting me by shaking my hand. I believe it was my father. He died of Alzheimer's disease and was in a state of disarray when he died. He was standing up and looking healthy, and I noticed his short stature. All of these people were overjoyed to see me. My next recollection came to me in a split second. All of my options, to stay or go back, flashed through my mind in a flash. I believe I was coached into returning. Someone showed me all of my options, and when I decided to go back, this being, or something, assisted me in doing so. It wasn't a terrifying sensation, but rather a point at which a decision had to be made. My hand was still holding, not shaking in greetings, the person I had first met. The hand was soothing and warm. As I floated backward to the living world, my hand slowly and gently slipped away. When I let go of the hand, it wasn't holding me at all, but it had a very gentle grip. It was then over. I had returned. I recall seeing a brown door with an old-fashioned porcelain doorknob on it, surrounded by a black background somewhere during this entire experience, or whatever it was. I knew there was a religious phenomenon on the other side of the door, a very bright light, and most likely God. This door is always open and accessible to all. I can go through it whenever I want. I have a feeling my hand was on the doorknob and that I could have gone through it whenever I wanted. In retrospect, I'm no longer afraid of death. I have a strong feeling that there are people who went over to the other side against their will, and I pity them. They are content there because they've adjusted, but they would have preferred to spend more time in the real world with their loved ones. I'm not sure if it's psychological or physiological, but I don't like watching movies that depict a reenactment of a tragedy in which people have died. If the film is fiction, it appears to be fine. But like in the film The Titanic, I wouldn't go see it because I know it's not fiction. Real people died, and I mourn their loss in this world. When I see a true tragedy on the news, I also change the channel. These are activities that I've only recently begun. Maybe I've always had these feelings inside, and they're just more sensitive now. I read about other people who've had NDEs and noticed that some of them are similar to mine. I also understand that my experiences, as well as my interpretation of them, are unique to me. When I read other people's accounts, I feel a bond with them and a sense of relief that I'm not alone in my experience. At the time of the collision, it was expected that he would die. In a snow and ice storm, my daughter was driving the car. We're Canadians. She lost control of the vehicle and spun sideways, with my side facing oncoming traffic. A large bus was heading straight for us, or more specifically, me on my side. I thought I was going to die, so I unbuckled my seatbelt, something I never do, and slid over to protect my daughter. When I looked at her, I knew she wasn't going to die over this. When the impact hit, I was either thinking or about to say I love you for the last time. She survived. I softened the blow for her. She was discharged from the hospital the next day. I stayed for 2 months. As a result, I believe that fear of pain and fear of dying did not trigger my NDE. I now have a great deal of respect for people who are deeply religious. I had a glimpse of something that very few people get to see. I'm glad I got to experience it. I enjoy telling people, but I'm very selective about who to tell. Following my NDEs, I appear to have developed empathy for the pain and concerns of others. I believe it was always there, but the NDEs confirmed it. I sincerely want to assist others with their problems and hope to do so for the rest of my life.